Welcome to Bedtime FairyFails. I'm Kim. This episode was made possible in part by the live play D&D podcast All D20. We'll tell you a little more about them after the show. I was asked to credit this story to the school Clank in Denmark. This is a lesson in risk-taking and resourcefulness, and it teaches us the value of a level head. This is, you can't get blood from a stone. Once upon a time, a group of adventurers had been hired to kill a dragon and harvest its blood. It was a young red dragon, but still a dangerous foe. Let's meet our party. We have a half-elf ranger named Tovin, a human fighter named Feisty Fisty, Timid Tim, the halfling rogue, a human warlock named Zephyr, and an elf druid named Elowin. Now, like I said, this was going to be a dangerous mission, so the quest giver provided them with some gold so they could go and stock up before they left. The party makes the standard purchases, some health potions, gear upgrades, stuff like that. But Tovin had his eye on something else. You see, they also found a shop selling some magic items, and Tovin had found a Rod of Wonder. In case you're unfamiliar, a Rod of Wonder is a magic wand that casts a random spell every time you use it. It can do things like cast fireball, stun the user, shoot out bursts of colorful lights. It's impossible to predict. And Tovin decided that's what he would buy with his gold. Mostly as a silly gag item, but hey, you never know. After everyone has made their purchases, the adventurers head out to slay a dragon and collect its blood. And soon, the heroes are approaching the mouth of a massive cave. They slowly creep inside, watching for any movement. Suddenly, they hear a deafening roar. And the battle begins. The massive red dragon charges at the heroes, teeth bared. The rogue shoots his crossbow while the fighter swings his axe. Both make contact, but the dragon seems unfazed and continues his charge. That's when Tovin decides this is the perfect time for his Rod of Wonder. He figures it's early enough in the fight that he can get away with it. Everyone is still at full health, and they can afford a few shenanigans. Maybe he'll get lucky and do some damage, or at the very least, shoot out some butterflies and distract it for a minute. So Tovin pulls out his magic wand, points it at the dragon, and then, poof! The dragon is instantly turned to stone. Everyone stops and stares.
What the hell, Tovin? We were supposed to get its blood. Now it's stone, which means no blood, genius. What are we supposed to do now?
Yells Feisty. Tovin looks sheepishly at the ground.
Well, I didn't know it would do that.
He replies.
You just had to get that stupid gag one, didn't you, Tovin?
Says an annoyed Elowin.
Look, guys, I'm sorry. Maybe there's something we can do.
Pleads Tovin.
Of course there's nothing we can do.
Snaps the fighter.
It's stone. You can't get blood from a stone. It's literally an idiom. Idiot.
Yeah, that was kind of a dick move, man.
Says Timid Tim.
Are you kidding me?
Why would you do something like that?
Are you
What were
serious?
you
As everyone is arguing, Zephyr the warlock, who had been silent up until this point, walks away from the group towards the dragon. He closely examines it up and down. Then he does something that gets everyone's attention. He beheads it.
Oh, come on. Why did you do that? It's solid stone, man. You're not going to get any blood from it now. Didn't you hear me about the idiom thing?
The other heroes are equally confused.
Yeah, I have to side with Feisty here, Zephyr.
Says Elowin.
I don't think that's gonna help.
Of course it's not going to help.
Snaps Feisty.
It's the opposite of helpful. At least if it was still intact, we could have sold the statue. Now, it's completely worthless. What is it with you people?
Zephyr completely ignores the angry words of the fighter and instead places his hand on the dragon statue and dispels the flesh-to-stone spell. Instantly, the dragon body is back to normal and the carcass falls heavily to the ground, bleeding everywhere. Zephyr silently takes a flask, fills it up with dragon blood, then puts it in his bag as he turns to leave.
You guys coming or not?
Asks Zephyr as he walks out of the lair. And that's how the party defeated a large red dragon in 6 seconds flat. The end. This story was sent in by The Professor, with 2 F's. This is a charming story about commitment to friendship. This is Jim Enchanted. Once upon a time, a group called the Reclaimers had ventured deep into a dungeon to recover a magic item. The group was made up of an elf warlock named Ilar, a dwarf cleric named Hondo Hazelax, a human swashbuckler rogue named Young Jim, and a fire genasi paladin named Aaliyah. With their powers combined, they were Captain
No, Kim.
Sorry. They were the Reclaimers. So like I said, the party had been fighting their way through a dungeon and had finally gotten to the final room. But it was empty. However, covering the walls and floor was a giant mosaic. The colorful stones shone beautifully in the firelight as the group went in for a closer look. Suddenly, the stones started to shift and move, and out of the mosaic stepped an evil mage. And he was holding the very magic fan they had been sent to retrieve. The group backed away and prepared for battle. First, the mage turned towards Aaliyah and waved the fan at her. Her eyes glazed over for a moment before she looked confused at her party members, who were now attacking her friend, the mage.
Guys, what are you doing?
She cried. Young Jim was next to be charmed. He also stopped attacking.
Yeah,
He said.
why are you doing this? That evil mage is our friend.
Hondo cast Sacred Flame at the wild mage while Elar threw an Eldritch Blast. About that time, Aaliyah snapped out of it. She immediately attacked the mage while young Jim stood beside her in distress over his closest friends fighting. Then, the evil mage waved his fan at young Jim a second time. He looked around and thought,
What's going on? Why am I standing next to the enemy when my best friend in the whole world is just over there being attacked?
He looked at Aaliyah full of hatred and stabbed her.
Young Jim, stop! You're being charmed!
She cried, but it was no use. He sprinted across the room to defend the only person in the world who mattered to him, the evil mage whose name he didn't know. The rest of the group worked hard to take down the mage with as little damage to Jim as possible, casting spells just off to the side of him so that only the mage was hit. Jim, however, was not holding back. Luckily, his aim was a little off that day, probably because of the emotional distress of almost attacking his very best friend, Evil Mage. After a long and stressful battle, the mage finally went down. They did it! Everyone breathed a sigh of relief until young Jim's blade sliced through the air just inches from Elar's face.
He's still under the spell.
Yelled Elar.
We have to take him down, guys. It's our only option.
Said a solemn Hondo. The Reclaimers switched to non-lethal damage and turned on their comrade. After a short battle, Aaliyah landed the final blow, knocking young Jim out cold. The party then tied him up and discussed what to do. Hondo the cleric said,
This isn't good. If we don't remove the spell within a week, young Jim is gonna die.
What? Why?
asked Ilar. Hondo replied,
Because he won't be able to fulfill his objective of protecting the evil mage.
Aaliyah asked.
But can't you just dispel it?
No, I don't have all of the necessary components. Let's just get him outside and I'll call for help.
About this time, young Jim woke up. He began acting terrified, snarling and lashing out like a caged animal, doing everything in his power to escape. Luckily, he was tied up and couldn't get very far. Yet. The party proceeded to drag the frantic rogue out of the dungeon and out into the open. Now, young Jim had a teleport ability that he could use once per day. So as soon as they were out in the open, he immediately teleported 40 feet away. Straight up. The heroes looked around confused for a moment before Aaliyah yelled, "Move!" They all jumped back out of the way as young Jim came crashing back down between them with a thud. Ilar said,
Hondo, you want to make that call, buddy?
Hondo nodded and sent a message to their quest giver using the sending spell. The patron agreed to send another cleric to meet them who could dispel the charm, but she would need payment. They unanimously agreed to go ahead and give her all of young Jim's gold. After all, this was for him, right? It's only fair. Meanwhile, young Jim had begun crawling away on his belly like an inchworm. Aaliyah sighs and says,
I'll go get him.
Eventually, they made it to the meeting spot and the cleric successfully dispelled the curse, leaving young Jim good as new and completely broke. The end. Thanks for listening. If you like D&D podcasts, which clearly you do, be sure to check out one of our favorites, All D20. You can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. To submit a fail, email me at bedtimefairyfails@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Bedtime FairyFails and Twitter as BT FairyFails.